work. He spent 7 months in a coma. In the first week he was in the hospital, our family was told 4 different times he would not make it through the night. A lot went wrong to get him into this position at his workplace, but also some things went very right because the employer had sent them all for emergency medical training. His coworkers saved his life. So he's home now. He's in the care of his wife. Neither of them were really ready to become, for him to become dependent. And oftentimes we discuss all of the corporate and societal costs back there, but I want to try to really, really make this personal for you. And when you go back to work, when you talk to your coworkers, your peers, your employees, to make it personal for them. So let's talk about costs to people. So workers' compensation replaces about 60% of wages. So any way you look at that, that's a 40% pay cut, perhaps for the rest of your life if you can't go back to work. So also, you need to ask, will your spouse's career suffer too? If you're being cared for at home, your spouse is probably going to spend some significant time off work caring for you. And also a significant amount of money, and this is above and beyond insurance. So another thing to think about on this, what if you're single? What if you don't have anybody to care for you? Are you insured for that loss? Is it something that you're going to be able to get by? Even more costly yet, depending on the level of your disability, you could become completely dependent on others to run your affairs. And as you can see in the case here, it says a disabled mom fighting to keep her son. Her ex-boyfriend decided that after she became disabled that she should not have her own child anymore. I don't know how that court case panned out, but the court could also decide for your family if you become unable to attend to your own affairs. Yet again, something very costly. So let's talk about bidding and keeping work. What if your incidence rates are below the standards for your industry? Is that really proof that your company's safe and doing everything right? Something that's been coming up a lot with our students lately is third-party verification requirements. These requirements from the ISNet Worlds, Browse, PEC, etc. are going really well beyond looking at your incident rates, and they're really looking more at management. And more companies are requiring these verification of your safety and health programs. What are your financials? What other information are they looking for? They're looking to see what your whole company is doing as far as safety. So even though your company might not ever be subject to this third-party verification, it's still really valuable to have that safety and health management system because it keeps you from being blind. A well-managed safety and health management system literally feeds into your ability to keep your fingers on the pulse of your company, safety-wise and also culture-wise, with a lot of other things that are going on. So how do you get started in this? How do you get going on a safety and health management program? We'll be talking about that more later in this program, but I wanted to point out again, OSHA has an enormous amount of information available on the website. There's professional safety services that OSHA offers, so you don't have to go it alone. Along with OSHA, I also wanted to point out that there's ANSI Z10 standard and ISO 45001. These were published really this year, and they both deal with safety and health management systems, and those are what some of these third-party companies are basing how well you're doing on. So more on bidding and keeping work. What if you don't have a safety and health management system, or the one you have isn't really effective? In short, unless you're extraordinarily lucky, it can decrease your ability to compete, or maybe even expose you to losses from injuries, illness, or deaths. Employers are watching their bottom line, and I can give you several examples over the last few years of contractors actually losing business when their incident rates were too high, or being removed from the work sites when they were caught in unsafe acts. So these bigger companies are really tightening down on their safety management, which is probably a good thing and something we should also be paying attention to. So moving along here, what are the costs of a bad reputation? Where does reputation feed into this? Well, I could say ask BP, who lost about $40 billion after Deepwater Horizon. And also, I just read an article here in the last month that called out a group called the Dirty Dozen. And these are really large companies that were published for having poor safety records, for killing or hurting their employees. So what I want to put kind of in mind of this is customers vote with their dollars. And a bad reputation, once established, is almost irreparable. And speaking for myself, if I know a company doesn't really care for their employees, I'm probably not going to buy from them. So let's connect employee retention, workplace culture, and reputation to safety. If we don't have people, we can't do work. So reputation is important to everybody, and demonstrating concern for employee well-being is one of the many reasons they will stay on, even though safety might not really be at the top of their list. So think on your own experiences here. If there's a blindness to safety, there's probably lots of other things that are lacking, and probably some of those will include problems with vision, accountability, and trust. The graphic on this slide is from Glassdoor, and it rates employers. So ask yourself now, how attracted are you to a 1 or 2 star company? Would you give them a second look? How many 5-star employees would be attracted to a 2-star company? So again, these things feed into the safety and health management, and when you get it right, a lot of other things will fall in line too. So we've covered a lot of ground so far. Now let's get real about doing the right things for the right reasons. The last slide had 3 words on it: vision, accountability, and trust. A powerful means of sustaining organizational safety and health is having a culture that truly values safety and health. This requires vision, accountability, and trust. So the vision part of this is what your company stands for, what it does, and how it does it. Your safety and health vision may be incorporated into your company's overall vision and mission, but it absolutely must be a part of your safety and health management vision. So putting safety and health up front and stating it as vision and mission sends a very clear message of its importance. Accountability. No safety and health program is effective if there isn't accountability. Again, this will be covered a lot more in depth later in the program, but having a safety and health program really relies on this accountability, and it helps move your company from talking safety to actually doing safety, actively managing safety, and generating a safety culture and systems that do not rely on luck, but are quite deliberate and by design. Trust. I can't say enough about trust. In my business, we talked all the time, safety, 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 safety. And I can tell you, over 25 years of career, we talked a really good story. We had some really fantastic training, and I think some of that talk and some of that training went into the good luck, but I know a whole lot of people in instances where their luck simply ran out. A lot of these, when you go back to look at them and you go through the human factors, that lack of trust within the organization, people not talking, not communicating, were causes. Maybe not the direct cause, but they were latent causes of how people became either very badly injured or even dead. And there's no shortage of instances where really stellar careers were lost over something that was based on trust. And when you violate that trust, it's really a problem. So this is the last reason for having a safety and health management program. Effective safety and health management programs help generate an environment of openness. A well-run program talks the talk and walks the walk on safety. It holds everyone accountable, including leadership. That means everyone has everyone else's back when it comes to safety. It sets a clear intention that everyone goes home in the same condition they reported for work, and that safety does not get traded just to get the job done. So I'm going to wrap up here. In summary, we covered the enormous cost of getting safety wrong. We've covered how programs tie to a company's mission, and we covered the benefits of safety and health programs as intentional means to manage so much more than the bottom line. There's no shortage of evidence that safety vastly impacts the ability of a company to compete and remain in business. So what I'm going to close with is we need to do the right things for the right reasons. Make sure your programs aren't just talk and good intentions. You're going to make mistakes. So just accept that. Mistakes are also learning moments. Recognize them, use them to grow. Action speaks much louder than words. Do something. Do safety. Walk the walk. Assure your ship completes its mission and that everyone goes home. And that is all I have, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Karen, for that. Injuries and illnesses, no doubt, are costly and tragic, and you gave us excellent examples in showing how that is so. Our next segment on core elements, safety and health management system programs, is going to be presented by John Newquist. John Newquist is an independent safety trainer, author, consultant from 2005 to 2012. He was Region 5's Assistant Regional Administrator for Cooperative and State Programs, where he managed the region's training programs, Susan Hardware grants, state plans, consultation grants, and VPP programs. He's a certified safety professional, founding member of the ANSI Z359 Standards Committee for Fall Arrest Systems. He created and taught the first OSHA Training Institute Fall Arrest and Process Safety Management classes. He also teaches hundreds of safety seminars across the country, including National VPPPA, Construction Safety Conferences, ASSEP, National Fire Protection Association meetings, and he worked for OSHA from 1983 to 2012, including a stint as the area director for the Peoria area office. John, are you there? Are you with us?
Good morning, Paul. I'm going to be covering management leadership, employee involvement, and safety and health training. And one of the things we always talk about, as Karen said, the leaders are going to set the example and walk the walk. But we're also running an issue with culture differences in what the managers think and the employees think and the first line supervisors think. If you go into a facility and says safety first or expect the worst, do you think we got a type A manager who's going to be very directive, or do we have a manager that's going to get everybody involved? Probably going to be more of the type A. And, the thing is that that's becoming an issue because with low employment in states like Nebraska and Iowa, if you get the reputation as the employer that nobody wants to work for, you're going to be like some of the large companies I'm dealing with where they can't fill the jobs, and therefore they're running at half capacity or 75% capacity because even though they're paying well, there's a lot of other jobs that are competing, and the employees don't want to work there. So it becomes an issue if they're going out there, whether it's temp agency determining your level of work they're going to send. They come out there and they see machines aren't guarded. They're not going to send people there to even work for you now. So one of the things we try to go through a lot of times is they can do what they call a gap analysis. We take a simple survey. This is just a simple set of questions where we're going to go through 6, 10, 20, some people even use 70 questions. And we survey people to see if there's a difference between what the managers think at the top versus the first line supervisors versus employees. And our safety and health integral part of operation, hopefully the answer is going to be yes. And then teamwork is going to be apparent in all parts of organizations. Then the managers on the floor frequently observe the company's safety and health rules. That's important because if you say there's no cell phone use in your plant or your site, and then the manager are out there with a cell phone, what kind of example is that going to set for people? What's the real message you're sending? Employees are encouraged to identify safety and health hazards, correct them, and win. Just to give you a feel, if you have a company of 100, average amount of suggestions might be 1 or 2 a year if you go out and you don't really look at it. If you have a method to really put people and get them involved and ask people what the issues are, then you can easily get up to 25, 30, and outstanding would be 50, and the world class is 1 to 1 for every employee. Employees have full access to all the tools they use to safety. What I'm seeing a lot of times is if you get these safety committees, they bring up issues that they need, and it's so simple. If you make it easier to find the stuff, closer to get to the stuff, people will use the safety items, whether it be lockout, having brooms, or anything else they need for gas monitoring. So I always tell companies, you want to benchmark where you are as far as the amount of accidents, lost times, and total case incident rates. And just some people just look at the recordables. You know, at this one facility, they were averaging with 125 people about 50 injuries a year, which is a huge percentage of people. They were setting record revenues, but they weren't making any money because of the cost of these accidents. And that's why that safety pays calculator is very good. But as they started implementing the program's elements of, you know, audits and training and worksite analysis, they started getting down below the industry benchmark. Now they've doubled the employment, doubled the revenues, and the industry rate for their size would be about 19 recordables total for the company. And you can see they got it down to 16 a year after this, and then down to 7 and 6, and they're trending right now at the end of July about 2. And these are important things because every dollar you're below the industry average, or every incident, is a certain amount of money. The National Safety Council is going to say that a recordable that it goes to a clinic is like $3,500. Same thing for $35,000 for a hospital visit. So you can start adding up by the safety pays how much money you're saving below the average, and guess what? You're going to be paying lower worker comp, which is real dollars in sales that you can now put into other parts of your plant, like equipment or tools. So employees have to be involved in it, and this is a tough thing. I mean, people, generally you can't go out to employees and ask them, is it safe? They're going to tell you yes. What you want to do is, frame it in what could make your job better, what could be better in this process, and we try to get in there and ask this on a periodic basis. I like observations where people go out and watch somebody work and see if they've got the right tools, equipment, and getting people to bring up issues like maybe these gloves, they're not so good. They're very hot in the summer. We can't wear them. Or, I brought these brand new $150 cast hard hats, and the glass is right on top of my face, and I get claustrophobic. I don't want to wear them, even though it's supposed to be better. So these are things that employees will bring up to you. 70% will bring up something if they think it's unsafe. 30% will just keep on doing the job. And that's a problem you got to think about also. So in the VPP, which is a voluntary protection program, 2,500 companies are recognized to be world class in OSHA's eyes. They, get involved in inspections, audits, industrial hygiene, everything that makes a company good. And part of the thing they also have is a safety and health committee. And a lot of people start those, but if you don't give anybody training and hazard recognition, they don't know what's wrong. It's kind of tough. You also want to make sure that the head of operations and finance are also there, as well as maintenance and safety, because there's nothing worse than a committee saying we need to go over and get this machine guarded, and the maintenance person's not there, or the finance people say we don't have the money to do it this year. So you need to really want to make a good committee. You want the top people involved. Most of the ones that I see that are world class, the plant manager runs the facility, or the safety manager for the district and construction does the same thing, and these work out well. And you pick a certain amount of employee representatives, and this becomes a way for the employees to bring it up to somebody else. They may not want to go up to the safety manager or maintenance operation, but they'll go up to a coworker and say, hey, next time you have a committee, could you mention this issue? So, the training component is important. There's, rules by OSHA that says you have to go through it. But, once you have people trained in recognizing hazards and you go out and you do the audits, these are going to be important things to go through. So part of the training is to recognize that there's things that could go wrong that may not even be in the OSHA book. Here we are, we got a trailer, we're shipping out construction equipment on the flatbed trailer, and they had welded a chain to hold up the Caterpillar excavator. Chain broke and they re-welded it again. And they didn't know that you couldn't weld on alloy steel chain. It destroys integrity. And this is this is what I call an easy near miss. We don't have any accidents. But you could imagine if you dropped that excavator on the middle of the highway, you could have killed people and stuff. So this is the things we want to do with good training and updating it and making it fun and exciting. And I push monthly training for the managers as well as the employees, and a lot of people say, well, I want to do it every day, and that's fine. You can do job briefs every day. You can do toolbox talks and everything else. But I want to make sure we get all the required training, talk about different things that we're running up to. What are we seeing when we do these audits and everything else? So common training citations, here we are, we've got a confined space, we've got a blower, we've got everybody trained, we're getting ready to go in there, we're going to take monitoring out there. You can see he's got the hose where he's going to test all different levels of the confined space. This is a manhole at a factory where something blocked the sewer, and they've got to go out and get the blockage. So you have to think about all the different hazards we have in it. But there are common ones that OSHA looks at is quite a bit is respirators. If you require respirators to be worn at your facility, you've got to do annual respirator training. Fire extinguishers, same way, if you're expecting people to use them. Lockout training is a common manufacturing citation. We still get a lot of authorized people that have not had the training, and they're out there. Or we get the worst yet, you're a cleaning person coming in on the night shift to clean the stuff, and you don't even get the locks to lock out, and all they do is just tell you to shut the machine off and steam clean it. Getting out with hazard communication of chemicals, I think everybody's got the program and they've got the some training, but I'm recognizing that people cannot recognize a pictogram. They know what fire and they know what the toxics are, but when you start getting into the corrosives and the lung hazards or cancer hazard warnings, they don't know what those are. Forklift training, we get a lot of people have the initial training, but the 3-year recertification is not done, and personal protective equipment has to be done and analyzed per the 1910-132 standard. In the general industry standards, there's a requirement if you're a welder, a machine operator, a maintenance person, you must have documented electrical safe work practice training under the 332 to 337 standards. I like, going out and doing observations, and this could be part of an audit where you go out and you watch every person every month and you go over there. Ideally, everybody, if you've got a good program, they're doing it right, and you can get 95% of the people you're going out there. But you have to make sure that you're going to go over and give feedback, and the feedback is going to be specific and positive if it's correctly done, and you're going to talk about the different issues. And a lot of people said, "Hey, you're doing a good job." That's not specific, and I'm going to show you a different form, that they use on a lot of these. There's DuPont, there's Caterpillar. A lot of these systems have observation forms. This is the one I like a lot. It talks about you're using the right PPE, you're driving the forklift, you're following the safety rules, housekeeping in your area is good, the tools are good condition and they're safe. You've eliminated hazards in there like putting hot work welding tarps up. These are definitely good things, and you can do this. Some people, they do a lot of these. I would like at least everybody every month. And you have to talk about how to give good feedback, because that is not something a lot of people are told. They know how to give bad feedback. Oh, you're doing this wrong, and going through it. But we want to go in there and we want to document it. Everybody at any one time, they're doing the rules right, because this is what we're going through. So I get people who work on aerial lifts where they have to tie off because the boom extends beyond the base. And I can get 100% of the employees going out there having this fall protection being worn. 100%. Versus maybe 20 years ago, you're lucky to get 5% even wearing it. One of the last things I want to talk about is the safety fair. If you're doing a good program, you want to keep it up. And one of the things that I really find that makes a big difference is you celebrate safety. If you go out and have a milestone, I was talking to Teresa Long, who's also on the call. She had a lab that was 42 years without an incident. You got to celebrate these things. You bring in all your vendors. It usually doesn't cost you anything to bring these people in. You talk about it. You can do your monthly or annual training along with it. This place, they go out there at Sterling. They have people get fed, and they go through it, and they win prizes. And this is a big deal because, I like people wearing the company shirts too, because, that's good PR for you as a company where they're going out and people, go on and say, "Hey, what's it like to work there? Hey, what's the company good?" Oh, no, they take safety really seriously. They're going out there and having everything that we need. And this is a big deal. They do 2 of these a year. One of them's a dinner. This is the fair. I love the fairs, and I think it's a good example that you can try. So I'll turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, John. That was excellent, well-informed, and thank you for the celebration of that safety. Our next presenter on worksite analysis, hazard prevention, and control will be Daryl Daniels. Mr. Daniels is a safety professional and industrial hygienist with over 30 years of field work and management experience. He has worked in the aerospace industry at the Kennedy Space Center for Lockheed Space Operations, and he worked in the chemical manufacturing, electrical generation, transmission industry, and automotive industries, also the public sector. Daryl is the founder and president of CSP Safe, LLC. His work experiences include auditing, chemical exposure assessments, management systems development, programs and procedures development, and training. Welcome, Daryl.
Thank you, Paul. and good morning to everyone. So I'd like to continue our discussion on the major elements of a safety management system. Now, someone may ask you to define safety or industrial hygiene, and an appropriate response from you can be, it is the identification, evaluation, and control of hazards in the workplace. Now, one can also argue, after saying that every other part of a safety management system really exists to support that objective, to identify, evaluate, and control workplace hazards. So the next core element we want to talk about would be worksite analysis. Now, the model you see represents a continuous improvement model, and that top node is for a comprehensive baseline survey of hazards in the workplace. Now, it should not be mistaken for an inspection program, but a comprehensive workplace hazard survey is meant to be systematic, but does not mean that you're going to create an actual total list of workplace hazards. But it does mean that to the extent feasible, all potential hazards in the workplace will be sought out. Now, this particular exercise should be conducted by trained professionals, trained health and safety professionals, and they will have an exhaustive review of documents like previous inspections, employee concern reports, investigation reports, and just do a very comprehensive review of workplace hazards. Also, they will go out and perform a walkthrough of the facility. This type of exercise should be repeated maybe every 3 years, every 5 years, but something that you want to come back and review. Now, the rest of that model shows how that could be fed into your hazard inventory for your workplace. And like any continuous improvement program, you should have a period of review. You want to update your controls developed to identify, to control hazards identified, and then also update your inventory list, and then maybe have another periodic review. So that's just one area for worksite analysis. So now let's look at the various different methods or processes out in the workplace that are used to identify hazards. A management of change program is a good program out there to identify hazards. An employee concern program, I would highly recommend such a program to identify hazards and to allow employees to express their concerns. A good workplace inspection program, another key element or key method to identify hazards in the workplace. An incident investigation program, which is part of your incident management system, but the incident investigation program, if you think about it, is the evaluation portion. So we're trying to identify and evaluate hazards in the workplace. So post-incident, you want to evaluate those hazards, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, a good task or job hazard analysis program or job safety analysis program is crucial. So let's talk about each one of these. First off, I think we can all agree that changes in the workplace are unavoidable. Changes can include things like process changes, equipment changes, and even personnel changes. But when we make changes in the workplace, we sometimes create hazards, and so those hazards need to be reviewed prior to implementing those changes. So before we implement the changes, a good management of change program will force that review by all the players associated with that change. And their role is to try to identify hazards, that that may fall under their expertise. You have maintenance guys looking at the change, safety guys looking at the change, production guys looking at the change, and if they identify a hazard, then they need to point that out. Now you're going to want to identify and designate someone to play the role of the change coordinator. Now this person will be responsible for managing the change program, including confirming that a change took place, ensuring that some review is conducted, and then tracking all the recommendations that have been made and to address hazards identified prior to that change being implemented. Now, one thing about a management of change program, you're going to have to make it through the discussion regarding what is a change. As I said, some things are obvious, but some are not. And so some organizations just choose to have all changes reviewed. But a change program I would highly recommend, and I think it is crucial in your toolbox. Okay. Now let's look at an employee concern program. Now, I think it's often said that nobody knows the task or process and the hazards involved when working that task or process more than the people that are out there working the process, right? So with an employee concern program, employees are given a mechanism to express their concerns and then be confident that there will be some follow-up. And because, what we don't want is for an employee to express a concern and then that concern goes into a black hole and no one ever hears about it again. So with a written employee concern program, everyone knows their expectations, and so the employee can expect some follow-up after expressing their concern. And the thing about an employee concern program, it not only will help identify hazards in the workplace, but obviously it involves and engages the workers into the safety process. So I highly recommend an employee concern program. Now, how some employee concern programs may work, an employee may see a hazard or have a concern in the workplace, and then they inform their supervisors of that concern. The supervisor is given a certain period of time to address the employee's concern and then report back to the employee. If the supervisor cannot address that concern within that given amount of time, then that concern should be elevated, and maybe that concern can be put on the agenda for the next safety committee meeting and then addressed there. So there's definitely a closed loop. It should be a closed loop system, and that employee should be really, really confident that their concern will be addressed and then tracked to closure. So a good employee concern program, again, very vital in your toolbox for hazard identification. Okay, safety and health inspections, another cornerstone method or process in the workplace to identify hazards. Now, the workplace safety inspection program can be ran in many different ways. The worksite inspection events or exercises should be scheduled, and they can involve a select group of line workers. It should involve maybe the supervisor of the area being inspected. And I would highly recommend designating someone on the inspection team that their role is to get all the documents, all the findings, all the forms, and then document that on a list somewhere, all the findings. And then I also recommend posting the list of findings following an inspection so everyone can see. Okay. All right. Now, I also recommend part of the inspection program. Well, first, let's say that with regard to inspecting the whole plant, depending on the size of the plant, you may want to inspect certain sections or areas of the plant at certain intervals. And that way, you're guaranteed to get through the whole plant during a certain period of time, and you may want to cover the plant maybe 2 or 3 times a year. So you may want to have an inspection maybe bi-weekly with your team. Now, I also highly recommend, as part of the inspection, that your inspection team members are required to make contact with at least one employee on the floor during the inspection for a brief interview. They can ask those employees things like, how do you feel about safety, if they have any concerns about safety, or may even ask them to rate your safety program. That way, the inspection is not just an inspection of the physical, but also looking at behaviors and trying to make, again, contact with every individual. Now, a list of documentation of the inspection findings should be developed, as I said before, and this list should be maintained to ensure that all inspection findings receive some recommended corrective action that are tracked to closure. And this is consistent with all findings, including your employee concerns. They should all be tracked to closure. Okay, let's look at this slide here is an inspection report. It's a sample inspection report, actually an inspection checklist, something that your inspection team members can use when they're out completing or performing their inspections. So you can see this particular checklist is sectioned off by hazard type, and at the top there's a struck by, caught, in between hazards, and then underneath there are some things that the inspector can look for when out and inspecting the workplace. Underneath that, there's electrocution hazards. And on the other side, you see ladders, housekeeping, fire egress, welding, cutting. But there are several different ways and lots of different formats that you can put in a checklist together to aid your inspectors out there when they're conducting these exercises. Okay, incident management. Now, a written incident management program should define the type of incidents that are required to be investigated in your workplace. Okay. So following an incident, an investigation should be conducted, and of course the reason why we conduct an investigation is to prevent recurrence of a similar event, right? So that event should be investigated. And the goal here is to identify root causes of the incident. So the following incident investigation, we try to identify the root causes or management system deficiencies that if we correct those, we should prevent a recurrence of any similar event. If we can identify, I truly believe, if you can identify the cause of an incident, you can identify a fix to that incident. But again, recommendations, corrective actions associated or assigned to those incidents need to be tracked to closure. So again, your incident investigation is just a part of your total incident management system, but incident investigations is truly an excellent way, or forces you to evaluate a hazard in the workplace and then make recommendations to address those hazards. Okay, another exercise or tool in your toolbox to identify hazards in the workplace is the job hazard analysis, or the task hazard analysis, or the job safety analysis, all are meant to do the same thing. Now, good job hazard analysis, as I said, is designed to identify hazards associated with a task or a process. But the power behind this exercise is that the steps is to, or I should say, it forces you to break down that task or process into individual sequential steps. And so it is much more effective to try to identify a hazard for an individual step than it is to try to identify a hazard looking at a task or a process in its entirety. So you look at that one step, you identify hazards in that one step. You might even want to look and see if you have existing controls for that particular step. And if not, then of course you want to make recommendations or actions to control any hazards identified for that one step. And you do that for the entire task or process. A very powerful tool, very traditional tool, been in the safety toolbox for lots of years, but still very effective, and I'd highly recommend its use. Okay, so that was worksite analysis and ways to identify hazards in the workplace. And as we said, if we are defining safety, we want to identify, evaluate, now, and control. So let's look at hazard prevention and control. Now, you may have noticed that a recommended fix or some form of prevention or control is assigned to each hazard identified during our worksite analysis review. To be consistent and communicate expectations around the forms and the types of controls that you want implemented, a good written hazard prevention and control program should be developed. You develop a written program, that way your engineers and those, your maintenance guys, those who may be implementing controls, they know the expectations and they know what type of controls you expect should be tried initially. Okay. One thing you might want to consider in your program is consider using maybe a risk ranking tool. What a risk ranking tool would do, it would help you to prioritize which hazard controls should be implemented first based on the unwanted consequence if that hazard is actually realized. So think about that, a risk ranking tool to help to prioritize which controls should be implemented first. Now, with controls that are assigned to individuals, of course, there should be a target date for implementing those controls. And hopefully the individual assigned to those controls can meet that target date. If not, then they may need to move that date out. But consistent with what we've talked about previous, all of these action items or controls should be tracked to closure, making sure that that the hazards identified are either eliminated or controlled. All right, let's move on. Let's look at the hierarchy of controls. So we talked about a written hazard prevention and control program. And written into that program, you want to introduce or have your hierarchy of controls identified as part of the program. Okay. So let's look at the hierarchy of controls. And you can see at the top the choices. If we can eliminate the hazard, that is the most effective. I don't think anyone can argue that point. If we can eliminate the hazard, and sometimes if we're dealing with chemical exposures, if we can substitute the hazard or that chemical with something less hazardous, that is also most effective. So some forms of engineering or elimination would be, or substitution, as I said, would be, again, substituting a less hazardous chemical. Next down on the pyramid there, you see engineering controls. Now, engineering controls means that we're going to try to isolate the people from the hazard. Some forms of engineering controls could be ventilation. Okay, if we have a good exhaust ventilation system, that is considered a good engineering control. Also, maybe if we can surround or barricade a process, that'll be a form of engineering control. Administrative controls would be next. And as it says here, administrative controls may change the way people work. One form of an administrative control would be a procedure. A procedure, we hope, would influence one's behavior or the way they may approach a task. And so that administrative control may change the way that person may work. Okay. Another form of administrative control would be rotating employees to limit their exposure. One may be exposed to a hazard for half the day, and then you rotate that person out and have the next person come in. It could be a noise hazard or, again, a chemical exposure hazard. And then last but least, and the least effective, would be personal protective equipment. And of course, why is that the least effective? Because now personal protective equipment has to be worn properly. It has to be the proper selection of personal protective equipment. It has to be properly maintained. And so there are just so many things that can go wrong with PPE. So when selecting prevention or control methods, just think about the hierarchy of controls and try to follow this particular diagram. And that's all I have for today. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Daryl. And thank you to all our presenters, John, Karen, and our special guest, Kendra Jefferson. Here you see a slide with references and additional information. These links will be sent to you via email. And if you had or required more information, please contact us at the OSHA Education Center in your area. These are the locations and your hosts for today's webinar: the Great Lakes Regional OSHA Education Center, the Mid-America OSHA Education Center, and the National Safety Education Center Consortium. Again, if you have any questions, please contact us. We're here and happy to help. And with that, the summary: you have just learned the benefits of implementing a safety and health management system, the core elements of the effective safety and health management system, and the processes within each element. So we have a few minutes left, and we'll open it up to any questions and answers addressed to any of the panel and or OSHA representative online. You may use the space below for questions. And if one question doesn't come to you now, feel free to email any of us at the education center of your choice, and we're always happy to help. In addition to that, the sampling of the class you just heard was from OSHA course number 7500, which is titled Safety and Health Management Systems. It's a 5.5-hour contact hour class. You just got a little sample of that in 1 hour. And if you want additional information, you may sign up for that class or any of the other courses that the catalogs offer you. With that, well, I thank you for attending today's webinar, and I hope you all have a safe and profitable day. Thank you.
Got a question, best method for addressing supervisor accountability. This is John Newquist. I like the audit. We score it. We take a look at their site, all their workers or their departments, and see how well they do. Usually, if you're going to be in excellent company, the supervisors will get a score of 95 and higher. But when you go out at some companies, like I said, I've been through it, they're scoring in the 50s, 60%. That means that supervisor is accountable. They know the actions, they've got the resources to do it, they need to improve, and they need to buy into the safety program.